Being in a marriage or a long-term relationship with somebody who's severely avoidant is one of the loneliest places that you can ever be. Sure, you have a relationship, but there's no physical intimacy virtually whatsoever. There's no flirtation. There's no emotional intimacy. You're just like roommates. And it can feel very, very depressing, because no matter how hard you try to bring this person into the relationship back in a romantic capacity, they always stonewall and find reasons as to why they're not in the mood, or they just don't want to, or this or that. And no matter how hard you try, they just pull away, distance, pull away. In these situations, it's often the case that the avoidant actually has a lot of resentment built up against you, but they've never communicated this to you. They've never told you whatsoever, because avoidants fear communication because they associate it with rejection and abandonment. This goes back to childhood. Not only were they emotionally neglected by their parents or caretakers, they routinely had their feelings dismissed, completely outright rejected. The message was sent loud and clear: your emotions aren't welcome here. So they learned that nobody wants to hear their feelings, and it leads to conflict, it leads to rejection, and perhaps even abandonment. So when you're doing things that they don't like, or if there's a want or need of theirs that isn't being addressed, they're likely to just bottle it up and not tell you. The problem is, this leads to resentment over time. And that resentment will cause them to pull away, because that's what they do when they get triggered. They shut down, suppress emotions, they deactivate, and they detach. And you might ask them if everything's okay, and they'll tell you everything's fine. But you see the difference. This person is withdrawn from you. Physical intimacy is non-existent. There's just no romance, and no matter how hard you try, they're just keeping you at an arm's length. But chances are, inside, they're resenting you. The problem is, this resentment eventually leads up to an abrupt discard in many cases. When that resentment reaches the breaking point, then they're done. They're throwing you out, and you feel like as if you never matter. But the thing is, you're blindsided. It's not blindsiding to them. They've been building up resentment against you, but it's blindsiding to you. And this can be years into a relationship or marriage. And when you ask them why they're ending the relationship, they'll either give you very vague excuses, or they'll tell you the specific thing that they're resentful about, but they never gave you an opportunity to actually address it. If they ever communicated to you about it, it was indirect hints. They expected you to be the mind reader. Well, if this person if they love me, they'll just know what it is that I want and need. They should just know. They should just know is the mantra of an avoidant, because they don't like to communicate, they don't feel comfortable, they fear it. So they justify in their minds that if somebody truly loves them, this person will just know what they want. But nobody's a mind reader. And now there's resentment and even a discard and a heartbroken partner because of the lack of communication on the part of the avoidant. The physical intimacy stops too, because keep in mind, physical intimacy boosts emotional intimacy. It goes hand in hand. The more physical intimacy there is in a relationship, generally the more emotional intimacy. When an avoidant is triggered, well, they look to create emotional distance. That's how they feel safe, by creating emotional distance between themselves and their partner. Is how they protect themselves. They learn this from childhood, because they learned emotional closeness isn't safe. So they start to recoil at the thought of physical intimacy, because that means more emotional intimacy. No thanks in the mind of the avoidant. So they find a reason to not be in the mood, not be interested, always too tired, etc. And then when they do, it's almost robotic. But that's because this person is now trying to prevent that emotional intimacy from growing, and they're trying to create emotional distance. Without physical intimacy, without emotional intimacy, it's very hard to maintain a marriage. Sure, there are ups and downs. The problem is no communication, no intimacy. It leads to the demise of a marriage that could have otherwise succeeded had there been communication. Had both partners been equally concerned about each other's wants, needs, and feelings. When an avoidant is triggered and they're not communicating, they're only thinking of themselves. They're only thinking of their own perceived wants, needs, feels, feelings and fears in the moment. They're not considering the ramifications and the impact it'll have on their partner. Now, if they didn't communicate with you and you did everything in your power to show up as a loving partner or spouse, don't blame yourself. You're not responsible for their childhood attachment wounds, and you didn't force them to not communicate. It's a painful experience, and it can happen years into a marriage, an abrupt discard. It's very, very painful, and have some self-compassion because you didn't deserve it. You wouldn't have done it to them.